This video has been requested by the patron IMXSet21. I would like to start with some celebratory fireworks in their name if you don't mind. The reason is that IMXSet21 has given an incredibly generous donation that has allowed me to purchase a new powerful personal laptop, which has made the process of making videos much more comfortable. I will never forget that, and I hope you will enjoy the video. Let's begin. Oh nice, we start playing as a cute little fox. Okay, this is weird. Okay, I get it. No, I don't get it. What the hell? Hardland's tagline is quite on point. It is indeed a surreal fantasy adventure developed by Mountain Ship. The project has had a pretty long early access history, starting out from what I can tell as a fully procedurally generated open-world game back in 2014, and eventually transforming into a much more handcrafted shape for its final version release in 2019. I have been immediately intrigued by Hardland due to the disclaimer it has put up right in the main menu. No markers, no quest logs, and an open world. A fascinating concept, but does it succeed? Let's find out! My name is Stanislav Costiuc, I am a game designer, and this is my review of Hardland. I have to put out a disclaimer myself though, I haven't completed the game, and to be fair, I'm probably very far from doing so. The reason I stopped is because quite frankly, over the course of a dozen hours of gameplay, my notes have become a mess, and I don't understand anything now to the point of me stopping getting enjoyment. So due to the game's nature, it's probably gonna be the most challenging test of my Stasocritic system yet, simply because I actually don't know if I have all the information I need. But I will try my best to be as fair as I always am as we dissect Hardland, starting with the first category, design. This is the most important category of Stasocritic with the biggest weight, for as the way game is played and structured is what defines our experience the most. Before we discuss Hardland directly, I would like to touch upon some design theory and principles. Game design is not as much about creating concepts or thinking up ideas as it is about solving problems. So if we take a quest marker for example, it is absolutely true that a certain number of players will get more engagement if a quest goal is not explicitly marked on the map. But markers aren't placed in games just to make things arbitrarily easier or less interesting, they are added to solve problems that a significant amount of people might be experiencing. These problems, in the case of quest markers, range from understanding where you need to go, remembering what you actually need to do when getting back into the game after not playing it for a day or more, or what quest you had in progress, to prioritizing the tasks at hand. So when you say, I don't want to use quest markers, what this means in terms of design is, I'm not going to use these solutions to solve a set of problems players will be encountering. And that's fine because there is no one right solution to a problem, it all depends on the game really, it's just that some solutions have been standardized for better or worse, this doesn't mean you have to use them or that it's right to use them. But when you don't, you bring back all the problems these mechanics were meant to solve. Which means that an alternative should be provided, which Hardland doesn't really do. It's up to you to make notes however you want, but outside of text clues, Hardland won't give absolutely anything to help you prioritize information, even an internal notebook which will be up to you to fill. And as a game designer, I can't call that a successful approach, because Hardland is a sprawling open world with a massive amount of characters and quests, ranging from as localized as bringing a pie to a person standing 10 meters away, to collecting different hearts so you would be able to gain enough reputation to access the King's Root Hall. But will the game ever tell you how many hearts you need to collect? No. Will it tell you how close you are to collecting all the required hearts to get access? No. Will the game tell you which direction to go to for all the different locations it sends you to? At times, but most of the time, no. Will the characters repeat what they asked you to do if you forgot to note down a piece of information? Only sometimes. Will the game allow you to somehow pin on map the locations of doors or chests you can't open yet or enemies you can't kill so you'll remember to come back there later? No, you have to do that yourself somehow. The game won't even make it always explicitly clear what is actually the purpose of a quest. I was thinking that to help the mayor's daughter, Elena, I have to find the silver dagger she mentioned was taken away by her father, and that's what I noted down, only to eventually find out that this quest actually revolves around a stolen birthday cake that Elena hated. Now, don't get me wrong, I like what Hardland attempts to do. I like that the most explicit it gets about quests is when you complete them, and by not having a marker, by not having a journal or any of those things, you don't feel compelled to finish them just because they're there. You actually are putting thought in what you're doing, and you might not want to complete a quest because it doesn't feel right. Or at first you would think of a character one way, but then after participating in their quest line a bit, you start questioning their intentions and whether you should keep doing what you're doing. This is some really immersive stuff, and it works really well when the game has a net of quests within a relatively limited enclosed space, like in Fortuna Town, which is packed with content and hints you can find that don't take you all over the land, and as you complete them you find objects that are relevant for completion of the main goal, or what you think is the main goal. You can't really know because there is no journal. But I can't agree with Hardland just passing off absolutely all responsibility when it comes to saving, memorizing, organizing, or categorizing information. The game doesn't have to add quest markers, but it also doesn't provide any tools for players to work with. Sure, you can write down things in a notebook, but you have to be especially organized for it to make sense long term. I have a note about a yellow flower in a field, a location hint that was given by one of the NPCs. But I never wrote down where it was given. I took that note on my way somewhere, and after traveling a bunch I now have no clue where I would need to explore to act upon this note. It doesn't help that you can save only at campfires, and if you accidentally die, you lose all your progress since the last save. Campfires are placed pretty unevenly across the world, and it's easy to accidentally die, because with the limited amount of the information the game gives, you never know how hard-hitting an enemy you encounter would be, even if you've already battled with these types of opponents before. Even though I have killed plenty of goblin mini-bosses, sometimes I will just approach one that destroys me in one hit. And now I have to figure out which of the nodes I've marked as completed are now actually not, and I have to do those actions all over again. And after hours and hours of playing, all this in combination leads to a situation where you can potentially run around aimlessly with no visible sense of progress because you have a ton of, for all intents and purposes, dead nodes that just keep piling up. You have no idea where do you need to go to reach the location you want, so you're just roaming the uncovered map areas, and you didn't complete a single quest in a long time because you haven't yet seen anything or anyone that would help with their completion, and sometimes NPCs given important clues are very easy to miss. To be fair, Hardland tries to duplicate clues across different sources, like for example it does with some basic concepts, but the game has trouble doing that consistently. The reason why I focus on this topic so much is because this aspect of exploration and unmarked quest completion is the main concept Hardland revolves around, and really the entire reason to play the game. Hardland does have combat, but it's a very rudimentary system, which is not really an issue as the game is not about combat, though lock-on system would be helpful in case you play the game with a controller. There are disguises, but again it's just a matter of wearing a certain outfit or mask, as this game is not about social stealth or anything. And there is an RPG layer, and while there are some surreal things like getting hearts leveling you up, the stat systems are very basic and straightforward. And all of this is not a criticism of Hardland's gameplay or systems. Oftentimes you can find this weird belief among players and developers alike that if a set of mechanics is in the game, then it needs to have a lot of depth to it. That's not true. It needs to have only the things that would support the project, and Hardland understands that perfectly. Because it's already a game that asks for a huge amount of attention to its core principles. If one would also have to worry about learning the combat systems and figuring out how to properly build the character, the complexity of the whole experience will just rise through the roof. All these external systems exist to provide support to the core questing experience, and they achieve that goal well. It is a pity then that by ignoring tools to assist players, the said core questing experience is something that would appeal to a very limited audience. I have not gotten a quest completion achievement that will be received by more than 4% of players, and that's saying something. I love the twist on cooking recipes this game has, that depending on what you eat before sleeping at a campfire, you would get different dreams that provide different clues, and it's up to you to write down any recipe you notice. But this also doesn't mean I wouldn't appreciate a dream cookbook interface that would let me fill it up with different required ingredients and show if I have enough or not, and would allow me to put in a check mark if I used the recipe or not, and if I did, a window where I would write down a clue that it gave me. This would be one of many tools Hardland could provide that would help players greatly without sacrificing the integrity of the core concept. Yes, sure, there's real-life notebooks, but you as a player would use them for everything, and that tends to get messy really quickly for reasons I've mentioned before. All this is why, if you are to open up all the possible scores for design, feel free to pause if you'd like to read them all, I will assign a 7. I think Hardland has a great concept, its world is massive yet feels fully handcrafted, and there is a lot of quests and a lot of variety within them. All of which is magnified by the feeling of player choice you get due to not having automatically completing journal and quest markers. But the lack of tools from Hardland's part to help players gather their bearings in this huge world full of people and events really prevents all those things from shining consistently and sometimes at all. Let's move on to the next category, context. This category has a weight of 1 and it's about things that enhance the experience rather than define it. Plot, characters, motivation, themes, etc. Now, as you know already, I haven't completed the game, and Hardland lacks a comprehensive enough walkthrough online for me to assess this category deeper without spending hours myself. But I do believe even if I lack information on what multiple endings are there, or what other characters are there, and so on, I can still assess this category based on what I have played. The writing in this game is amazing. Every prominent character has a very distinct personality, goals, and conversation style. It's honestly a joy to talk to them, even if when you start the game you might find it very difficult to understand what they're talking about. Because Hardland really doesn't ease you into its world at all. It just throws you in the water, and it's up to you to understand what your starting motivation would even be and why. There are merits to this approach, though I can't say that I fully agree with it. However, as you dig into understanding what is going on, you'll find Hardland getting into themes of religious corruption, racial prejudice, fear of uncertainty, bias, little evil for the purposes of greater good, and many others that I haven't mentioned or wouldn't have discovered, but I am sure that there is more to the game. Plenty of characters in Hardland talk about rot that this world has been filled with at some point. But even though everything looks beautiful now, there is still rot festering deep inside the land and its people who can't bear children anymore, which is why the last born child 18 years ago gets so much attention. And this rot is not only physical but metaphorical as well. You will uncover what secrets lie behind different personalities that might seem kind or noble at first. But you will also participate in the process of healing, people beginning to understand each other, forgiving one another. Even when there is something dark hidden deep within everyone, maybe even yourself, there is still hope for a brighter future. And this is why I will assign a 10 for context. And I have to put out a disclaimer here that this is with an assumption that Hardland doesn't drill down on how it handles its lore and characters as the game progresses. You might say that it's unfair to put such a high score based on assumption, but it's also unfair to assume the worst. Either way, it was a choice between 8 and 10, and while at first I was thinking to assign an 8 because I didn't have all the information, in the end I decided to believe that the game would do its best consistently. That's the choice I had to make, just as there are choices in Hardland that you will have to make based on incomplete information, and only after would you fully understand what the repercussions of your actions were. Time to talk about aesthetics. This is another category with a weight of 1, as it's again about things that enhance the experience rather than define it, this time through visual style, music, sounds, etc. Before talking about this aspect of the game, I will let you experience the main menu for a bit. The music and visuals set up the mood perfectly, don't they? They both capture the surreal part that Hardland is going for. Textures are a bit plain and cartoony, but they're accompanied by a lot of really realistic lighting and effects. Characters are not caricatures or cartoons, in fact some of them are fairly realistic, but they're all somewhat disproportionate one way or another. These mixes give this little uncanny feeling that helps with the overall surrealism of the experience. Everything looks right, but at the same time a bit off. The songs you hear in the game are beautiful, but also somewhat distant, as if you're not hearing them right here and now, but somewhere beyond your reality. It's kind of funny, usually when I'm about to assign a 10 to aesthetics, I have tons of arguments why am I doing so. In this case, the arguments I can muster are few, but I hope it's still clear why I'm assigning such a score. The game's aesthetics are not only polished, but also perfectly set up the mood of the experience. Now, let's discuss Cohesion. This category has a weight of 2, and it's all about how well all different aspects of the game are connected into a single, wholesome, holistic experience. And you know, this is probably the category where you can feel the effects of the game's sprawling development history the most. Now, the aspect of dreams is clearly important. You eat to get dreams, you complete quests affecting people's dreams, your dreams lead to other quests, your dream also teach mechanics, dreams play a big part in the lore of the world, and the very start of the game happens in a dream. And different mechanics like eating hearts leveling you up definitely help with the overall dreamlike surrealism of everything. But all that said, you'll find quite a lot of things lacking consistency and feeling quite arbitrary. Like how among several identical objects on a table you can pick up only one, or how you can break into a location with an NPC who doesn't speak at all, perhaps he was needed for another quest, or how practically every person in the world has something to say, but there are some that you can't talk with and they stick out like a sore thumb in contrast. You can say that this all fits into the whole surreal, dreamlike aspect of Hardland, but I will assign a 7 to Cohesion because all this constantly reminds me that I'm playing a game with its own set of arbitrary rules. Time to discuss the final category, emotions. This is the most subjective part of Stasocritic, but it's got the second biggest weight, 3, because at the end of the day, personal feelings related to a game is what matters a lot. And I must say, I'm quite twofold regarding my personal feelings on Hardland. Here's the thing, for a number of personal reasons, since purchasing the game to review it, I couldn't play it daily, only a couple of hours every or so a couple of days. And every time I would enter the game, there would be a moment of friction when I would have to figure out what I wrote in my notebook and what I was planning on doing next, and every time I had to sort of keep rolling to get into the flow of things. But then I would have to leave, and in a couple days the process would repeat again. My last session I was essentially running around the uncovered parts of the map, being absolutely fully lost as to what I'm about to do, and encountering strong enemies which would send me back to the campfire losing progress didn't help. I really wanted to get into Hardland. I find this project really fascinating and the lore and narrative of the game intriguing, but in its current form, it's not for me. This is why, out of all scores for emotions, I will assign a 7. I kept crashing against what personally for me were friction points, and at some point I was tired of doing that, even though I really appreciate Hardland on a conceptual level. Let's summarize everything. After all scores and weights are taken into account, the surreal fantasy adventure Hardland is getting a final Stasocritic rating of 73. It's a good game, but it's not a game for everyone. I have seen online people who are very dedicated to this game, especially in Steam community, and if what you have heard about Hardland appeals to you and you don't have any reservations about the concerns I have mentioned throughout the video, well then for sure you need to try this game out, it's right up your alley. But for everyone else though, while I would heartily recommend Hardland to everyone really, I think you should try it only if you know what you're going to get on your purchase. An interesting and fascinating game that in its release state still won't appeal to everyone. And to me it's sad, because I think that with a number of additional features, Hardland would greatly improve its appeal without sacrificing what makes it unique. But still, even though in the end I wasn't hooked, I don't regret the time spent in this world. Thank you all for watching. A special thank you goes to people supporting me, especially IMX at 21 for the generous donation, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support me, feel free to check out my campaign at patreon.com/Farlands or the YouTube membership program. Thank you very much.